Stratchlyde Centre for Environmental Law and Governance was present last week at the World Water Congress in Edinburgh. We were present very actively. We participated in plenary sessions, we organized special sessions, we delivered presentations, we presented posters, and the World Water Congress allowed us to think and to consider key aspects, in especially one field that SCELG is developing very strongly, and that is the field of transboundary aquifer law and policy. And I have here with me Stephanie, Renee and Laura, who work with me on this specific topic, transboundary aquifer law and policy. And together we want to highlight a few issues, a few emerging trends that have come out at the Congress that can be relevant or are already relevant to this specific area. Stephanie.
So one of the main challenges that I found that came out of the Congress was the issue of uncertainty in relation to transboundary aquifers. It became very clear that there's a knowledge deficit in terms of the diversity of these hydrogeological systems, in terms of the relationship of groundwater with surface water, and where actually the boundaries lie, determining the size of the aquifers between states. But something that was even more striking was the difference in information given by states about their underlying aquifers because of different technologies or different methodologies in data collection. And as a result of this, there seems to be a conclusion that there needs to be a prioritization of data gathering before rules can be put in place. But maybe we should question whether we need a consolidated, agreed knowledge base before we put these rules in place because of the general uncertainty, because of the contested knowledge between both professionals and between states, and because the data seems to be continuously changing. So I think that really needs to be a focus, especially because of the issue of power and politics inherent in knowledge construction. That seems to be a huge issue. Now, another issue that really came very strongly out of the Congress were concepts of equity and justice. It was widely debated, talked about what does this mean, but it really seemed to come down to issues of distribution and participation in decision-making and political processes and issues of recognition. So taking these concepts, I think we could really use these to have a useful tool or an important tool in dealing with these issues of uncertainty and of contested knowledge.
And as you were saying, not knowing what to look at, there was some presentation that actually contested numbers that are circulating there and so forth. Again, what you were saying about equity and justice, SCELG, Stratchlyde was very much involved in this. We had a special session with Edinburgh and Dundee, which was very well attended, very interesting. Very interesting points there. Renee, what was your take from the Congress?
One of the things that struck me follows on what Steph was saying, and it was also included in the closing remarks summarizing the takeaways from the conference, and that is that the area of governance, especially for aquifers, is pretty much wide open. There's a lack of data, but there's also a lack of governance instruments for transboundary aquifers. We have some guidance out there in the form of the Watercourses Convention and the UN International Law Commission draft articles on the law of transboundary aquifers. There's also the UN ECE model provisions on transboundary groundwater. So nations that want to form a treaty, an MOU, some kind of agreement on transboundary aquifers have a place to go to get some ideas, but so far there are very, very few agreements that are in place, and so it folds in very nicely with the goals that we have at SCELG to try and develop the law of transboundary aquifers, because there seems to be a vacuum out there.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and as you said, closing plenary, one of the key issues was governance, and governance is definitely one of the points that were coming out strongly from the Congress and one of the areas that we look at in our center. Laura, what did you take out from the Congress?
Yeah, linking the presentation of Steph and Renee, and linking that lack of knowledge and data and this lack of governance instrument, I think we can see it very well reflected in the fact that there are very few international transboundary arrangement or agreement on transboundary aquifers. And it's a very low number if we compare it with the hundreds of treaties that exist about surface water, above all with the increasing number of transboundary aquifers that have been catalogued so far, around 600, because we can only find hardly 5 transboundary examples of this kind of agreement. So we have 2 very informal arrangements for the exchange of data information in North Africa on the Nubian Stone Sandstone aquifer and on the Northwestern Sahara aquifer. We have another memorandum of understanding in West Africa on the Iridium aquifer. Then we have a treaty on the Guarani aquifer in South America, but it's not yet in force. More recently, Jordan and Saudi Arabia have concluded some sort of arrangement on the DC aquifer, but they are the 5 examples that we have so far. But we can also find some initiatives, some transboundary arrangement between both local or federal entities on transboundary aquifers. The best example is the one of the Genovese aquifer between France and Switzerland, but we can also find this kind of arrangement in the border between Mexico, United States, and in the border between United States and Canada, and they have been proved very effective. So, of course, there's a long way to go in this transboundary legal governance on transboundary aquifers, but we can also learn some useful lessons for these few examples. First of all, that states need to exchange data information. That's the lowest common denominator of all these agreements, and also that sometimes the local initiatives can be very useful in this management of transboundary aquifers.
And that just highlights within the governance stream that scale can be very important. That came out also quite strongly at the Congress. Another element to conclude that was highlighted at the Congress, which has relevance for groundwater and transboundary aquifer management, is the question of nexus. There's a lot of different debates, sessions on the nexus between water, food, water, energy, water, climate change. And that obviously has also very strong implications for groundwater, in particular, for example, for climate change adaptation. And if you think of energy, if you think of the development of shale gas, not just in the US, but all around the world, there's a very strong link between those aspects. Other aspects that are slightly less relevant maybe for groundwater, but could also have some implications, were a lot of debates on massive dams, on new hydropower, difference in donors. Renee, yourself, you mentioned it at the plenary at the end. So these are all aspects that SCELG will carefully consider, will carefully monitor. And it also highlights the World Water Congress and the work that SCELG does, how lawyers and other disciplines work together and have to work together in this field. And it's something that we will definitely continue doing in our work on transboundary aquifer law and policy.